Prime Minister Narendra Modi has held several bilateral meetings during his three-day visit to the United States of America. On the last day of his US visit, PM Modi met with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy on the sidelines of the UN summit. Viewers, this is to note that both leaders have met for the third time in 3 months now. During their bilateral meeting, both leaders have discussed the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. PM Modi has reiterated India's support for early resolution of the conflict and restoration of peace and stability in the region. Modi and Zelenskyy have also discussed India-Ukraine ties during their meeting. This is Prime Minister's third meeting with Zelenskyy. This also comes after Prime Minister Modi has spoken on terrorism and the new areas of conflict that have been emerging globally. Let's listen in to what Prime Minister Modi said at the UN.
Friends, success of humanity lies in our collective strength, not in the battlefield. और वैश्विक शांति एवं विकास के लिए ग्लोबल संस्थाओं में रिफॉर्म्स आवश्यक है. रिफॉर्म इज द की to relevance.
With Prime Minister Narendra Modi being the only leader to hold a meeting with Ukraine and Russia, what is the significance of PM Modi and Zelensky's third meeting, and how will this impact the situation of the ongoing Ukraine-Russia conflict is the big question. Joining us at this point is Robinder Sachdev, international affairs expert. Bhashpati Mukherjee, former diplomat, also joins us live. Sumit Peer, political commentator, is live with us as well. Professor Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, is joining us live. Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist, is also with us live. Robinder Sachdev, international affairs expert, also joins the broadcast. Let me get started with you first, Ambassador Mukherjee. Before we speak about these bilateral meetings that happen on the sidelines of the UN summit, let's just speak about Prime Minister's moot message there. The PM saying reform or perish. We had spoken about this yesterday. We had spoken, of course, about the need to reform, the fact that even the UN Secretary General had spoken about reform. But will this reform happen soon or not is the big question. Ambassador Mukherjee.
Well, Uday, as you say, we discussed this yesterday, and at that time also I had pointed out that I am not optimistic about the reform happening anytime soon, because there are some major powers that want to stand in the way of this reform, because they represent the world that had emerged after World War II, and they don't want powers that have emerged subsequently, including emerging powers like India, to have their rightful place at the Global Round Table, which is the permanent membership of the Security Council. Reform or perish is a message that the UN needs to hear, including the P5, because if the UN does not reform, then inexorably power will shift to other groupings, which is already happening, whether it's the G20, it's the Quad, it's BRICS, etc., because those groupings represent adequately the aspiration of the emerging powers and emerged powers, and they can also contribute in a better way to international peace and security at a time when the UN Security Council is completely deadlocked, because you have two members of the P5 vetoing efforts of the other three and vice versa. So the Security Council is not able to fulfill the role given to it by the UN Charter to maintain peace and security and to prevent conflict. So under those circumstances, our Prime Minister's message is not only spot on, it's very timely, and the UN General Assembly and the Security Council should debate his message, reform or perish. And he also said, if I recall correctly yesterday, he also said that we are running out of time. It's imperative that we do so. So under those circumstances, his meetings with the Palestinian president and with President Zelenskyy is also a clear message that here is a country representing 1.4 billion people, the fifth largest economy, which will become the third largest economy, which just chaired the G20 and which will chair Quad next year. And this country is not even a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. This country is not allowed to articulate its concerns regarding international peace and security in any forum relating to the UN Security Council, because each time we go into the UN Security Council as a non-permanent member, Uday, we have to then wait any time between 12 to 15 years to get another term. So reform or perish, I think, is a very correct terminology used very appropriately by our Prime Minister.
Absolutely, Ravinder Sachdev. And you know, the fact is that it was at a global fora like the UN. You know, so the message clearly hitting home, but will it hit home? That is a big question, Ravinder Sachdev. This was a summit for the future, and the Prime Minister did lay down the roadmap for the future, that the global South's voice will have to be heard.
So great point. I think it's doing both. It is hitting home, but on the other hand, it is not hitting home, because this will not result in any change. As Ambassador said, none of the existing veto holding powers would like to, dilute or bring anyone else into the room. And especially when within the five, there's a clear-cut split out there now, Russia and China. Who's going to share as a co-equal, bring another person, another wild card into the room? And who knows how these votes will stack up against me or the other. So the UNSC is absolutely, I think, in a logjam. I don't see any hope, honestly. But yes, calling for reform is a must. It serves to remind the world community, as well as, I mean, the UN and multilateral, there are many other agencies and many other, divisions, etc., other than the UNSC, which could be reformed. Otherwise, as also, absolutely, groupings like the BRICS, the G7, the NATO, the SCO, they will become the arbitrators of, peace and security happening. One. Secondly, Prime Minister's visit, to my mind, the biggest takeaway, I think, is that Indian foreign policy has clearly made a paradigm shift in this third term. Prime Minister has decided, and India has decided, we are going to play a very proactive, in fact, even I could say aggressive role to explore the possibility of a peace in Ukraine. And the PM has met, of course, we've all counted Putin, Zelenskyy, Biden, phone calls, etc., Zelenskyy again. And I think next month in the BRICS summit in Russia, in Kazan, the Prime Minister would meet Putin. So he'll be closing the gap after having face-to-face meeting with all these leaders a couple of times. So we could see something emerging. And what I see it as is, of course, India's growing, growing not only stature, India has clearly, coming out with a bang, saying that an Asian power could help, an Asian power could help resolve a European conflict. Imagine the paradigm change, right, which is out there. So the PM is moving ahead with a single point peace plan for Ukraine, stop war. Zelenskyy has a 10-point plan, Xi Jinping has a 13-point plan, Putin has maybe a perspective, NATO has some, but bottom line is what? A single point plan, stop the war. And I think that's where India is scoring good and doing very good right now.
Yes. Sumit Peer, let me quickly draw you in here. Sumit, clearly, of course, the Prime Minister's message, far-reaching and forward-thinking. But the big question is, are the world powers listening? Are the authorities of the UN listening?
Uday, thank you very much for having me on your show. I think Prime Minister's voice was the most reasonable and the only voice of sanity in the prevailing geopolitical situations, because he's the only one who is trying to show you a mirror. When you show a mirror to somebody who's ugly, they don't like to look into the mirror. That is the weakness we have. The challenge is that there's too many theaters of war which are opened and which are opening. Challenge is that Zelenskyy wants to get an approval from the West to use their arsenal in mainland Russia, which Russia warned against a nuclear retaliation or a father of all bombs. Challenge is that UK's Stammer has given Shalom missile to Ukraine with a kind of approval. He can use it on the mainland, where again Putin has threatened with a nuclear retaliation. We are seeing the Israeli-Irani conflict and American conflict, whichever way you want to look at it, it is escalating like anything. We have with these theaters of theaters of war which are open and which are going bigger. The Prime Minister Modi has put some voice of sanity. Look, you have to reform. You have to let the people who matter to come in. Today, I think I was looking today morning, Donald Trump says Zelenskyy is the biggest salesman because whenever he comes to US, he gets the money or he gets the weapons. Now, the challenge is you can't have these two things going on. You can have Prime Minister Modi who is literally shouting his lungs out and trying to plead you, bhai, let's have peace, let's stop the war. And on this other side, you're giving Zelensky weapons, you're giving him missiles, and Zelensky is asking you, Mr. Biden, you're going, why don't you set a legacy? How do I set a legacy? Allow me to use American weapons in mainland Russia. So you want to start a World War III possibly by doing that, which Putin has already warned us. Now, with these things going on, what is the relevance of United Nations if it cannot stop a war? For last 75 years, which war it has been able to stop? And today the challenge is, if you look at the P5, even if we have to do something in the P5, all the P5 members have to agree to an amendment in the P5 charter, which is next to impossible. Now, who are the three members if you talk of? You have Americans, you have Russians, and you have Chinese. They are three sides of a triangle. And I don't understand, with due respects to UK, how does UK has a place there and India doesn't have a place there? Now, if you expect us to do all the heavy lifting, you expect us to talk to Mohammed Abbas, you expect us to talk to Zelensky, you expect us to talk to Putin, you expect us to talk to Israel, and you expect us to be a balance in the region, you expect us to contain the China, you expect us to be the factory of the world, you expect us to be the growth engine of the world. But when it comes to our rights, you are not giving us the place what we deserve. You are denying us that place. This can't be, two-way out. We can't be the Koluka ball going round and round and round and making the oil for you. That is not going to work. So the message is very clear. Either you kind of change, or there will be alternates which the evolution will throw. And evolution has already thrown a lot of alternates. Vis-a-vis meeting with Zelensky, Uday, my opinion is Prime Minister Modi did the best efforts of any world leader to stop the war. But Zelensky is not in a mood to stop the war. If you have to really stop the war, you have to have a Putin talk to a Biden or a Kamala Harris or a Trump, whoever comes into position. Because unless and until the world stops giving weapons to the Zelensky, the war will not stop. Unless and until West doesn't do the classical mistake of allowing its arsenal to be used on the mainland Russia, which will be a disaster of unproportional heights, which Zelensky is really advocating for, the war cannot stop. Prime Minister Modi did what he had to do, and let's not forget, the kind of behavior the Americans have given us, issuing those warrants against Mr. Ajay Doval. This is atrocious. This is crap. We are trying to mitigate those wars. We are trying to get you peace, and you are issuing some court issuing a warrant against in the case of that Pannu Namki Makhi, and you are trying to issue a warrant against NSA. We understand this. We are sincerely talking of peace and tranquility. But what I see, the corresponding things what we are getting from the world, they are not that. Somebody is giving him missiles, somebody is giving him permission, somebody is issuing a warrant against our NSA Doval Saab. And what is happening? And then you expect us to do all the things, and you expect us to do all the heavy lifting. And on the contrary, you are trying to pinprick diplomacy here, pinprick diplomacy there. Tomorrow you will come up with the index and you will say India is the most corrupt country. Tomorrow you will come up with the index, India is the most hungry country. Your indexes will come on. And then you are meeting some of the people from the opposition of the India, which you should not be meeting as per the diplomatic protocols. So we have to understand this is a practical world. Everybody is looking for its challenges.
Yes.
Prime Minister Modi's voice is the voice of sanity, but Uday, unfortunately, it is good music to deaf ears.
Professor Madhav Nalapal, let me quickly bring you in here, because this was a very important address. Of course, while speaking about reform, which is needed, the Prime Minister also spoke about the peace efforts that should be made, and the fact that solutions do not come on the battlefield, as India has reiterated on multiple occasions in the past too.
Well, I'd like to point out, Uday, that during 2023, last year, when India was chairman of the BRICS, and the Prime Minister was the chairperson of the of the G20, frankly, at that point in time, he showed by his leadership of G20 what India is capable of. He brought different sides together. He looked at it from a worldwide perspective. And we are talking about Xi Jinping's plan, we're talking about Zelensky's plan. All these are basically plans serving one interest. Xi's interest or Zelensky's interest, some other interest. Prime Minister Modi's plans are serving everybody. They are plans which are meant to serve everybody. And that is the difference between Prime Minister Modi's plans and these other plans. The Prime Minister's plan is inclusive, it is universal. The other plans are exclusive. They are completely monofocused on serving one particular interest. In the case of Zelensky, from 2022 onwards, he's been trying to drag NATO directly into a conflict with Russia. That's the only salvation that he believes Ukraine can have. And this is part of that effort. I can't see Biden falling for that, frankly, because the last you've seen when prime ministers visit the United States, there's an immense success, and you've seen the latest White House tweets. They're very complimentary about India and very complimentary, if I may say so, generally about the leadership of India, namely Prime Minister Modi. So I'd like to say very clearly that so far the UNSC is concerned, frankly, I mean, it is not a serious organization. When the most populous country in the world, the most important country in the global south, China is not part of the global south, neither geographically nor in any other way. No, India is part of the global south, very much so, geographically as well. Well, the fact is, what relevance does it have? So, frankly, we are talking about something that is no relevance at all, as the Prime Minister correctly underlined. And I have long stated, let's see who's with us. Get the UNGA to vote on India. We'll get that 3/4. Then put it up before UNSC. My view is only one member will oppose, and that is China. So let's let the whole world know that China, an autocracy, is opposing the largest democracy in the world. So let's do that, frankly. And I've been in favor of this for a very long time, and I'm in favor of it even now. As far as the Prime Minister is concerned, he's a person without prejudices. He is meeting Zelenskyy, he's meeting Putin, he's meeting Mahmoud Abbas, he's meeting Netanyahu. Because why? He genuinely wants peace. He genuinely wants a harmonious world. And of course, at the same time, he understands that peace is not a commodity that is easy to come by or easy to maintain. And that is why he's going ahead with the Quad, he's going ahead with the India-US military exercises, he's going ahead in so many different ways. Altogether, I'd like to say, Prime Minister Modi has evolved into a global statesperson of eminence. And he has shown that India, especially India led by Prime Minister Modi, is perfectly capable of marching at the front of the world stage, as indeed it is doing. And if the UNSC does not recognize that, well, quite frankly, a club that does not have India as its member is not worth being a member of, Uday.
All right, let me in fact take that to Gautam Mukherjee as well. Gautam Mukherjee, now let's just speak, of course, a bit about the meetings that the Prime Minister held, on the sidelines of this summit as well, including, of course, the meeting that Prime Minister had with Vladimir Zelenskyy. Now, it's the third such meeting in 3 months. What do you make of the peace efforts that, of course, India has put at prominence, both in, of course, our address at Fora, but also translating our words into action through these meetings as well? Gautam.
Well, I think...
and here, I just want to quickly highlight not just the Zelenskyy one, but also Palestine.
Yes, I think Mr. Modi is signaling India's willingness to be a full partner in seeking peace, both in Gaza, Lebanon, Houthi, and that whole conflict with Israel and the United States, as well as the conflict in Ukraine with Russia. Having said that, it is India's position that war is not a solution. Maybe other people know that, but they don't pursue that particular line of action because they are committed to their own gains out of such a situation. At the same time, I think they welcome India's efforts, and at the right time, should that right time come, India will no doubt play a part. As far as the United Nations goes, it doesn't really matter in just 3 more years maximum. By 2027, India is slated to become the 3rd largest economy, and it will hold that position because it will remain the largest growing, the largest percentage point growing GDP for a decade and more to come. So, 2 out of the 5 economies that represent themselves in the UNSC are going to fall farther and farther back, while India goes farther and farther forward. After achieving third position, it will keep on growing its GDP, while the others will keep on shrinking it. You know, they have barely any growth. France seems to have recognized this rather with alacrity, because they have increasingly been upping the ante in terms of defense cooperation. They've offered us, completely technology transfer engines for fighter aircraft, nuclear technology for the submarines, and so on. They are not holding back at all in their bid to cooperate fully with the emerging actual profile of India. Britain is sitting on the fence, and to its own detriment, I think. And America is, at least officially, very much improving its relationship with India, particularly with fewer and fewer inhibitions when it comes to defense cooperation. Now, this is excellent. The irritants in the relationship with the US may always be there. These are the ways of a democracy. Modi sings a certain song and the opposition sings another. And if you were to listen to both, you realize never the twain shall meet. It is much the same in America. There are people who are opposed to India and America's cooperation with India, and they will always be there. But they are not able to shift any real earth, and it is really the official relationship that seems to be gaining strength upon strength, and we have very little to worry in that regard. Perhaps China, in its isolation, gradually will soften its stance. It is beginning to. If you want to draw a linear correlationship, you could say that the recent benefits on the LAC, where EAM Jaishankar says 75% of the issues have been resolved, and the other 25 are on their way. You might ask, why is China becoming more cooperative? I think it is starting to realize that it can't stop India, that it can't keep India down, and so it might be in their best interest to change their policy stance somewhat, with the new BRICS summit coming up very shortly. It would be in China's interest to improve relationships with India, and it may well do so. In which case, the UNSC problem, as we see it, may not be exactly what it is today, a decade hence from today, perhaps even less time. As far as solving these wars go, well, it's up to them, really. India is happy to play its part. Uday.
Yes, let me quickly go back to Ambassador Mukherjee on, of course, these these peace efforts as well, not just the meeting with Palestine, but also the meeting with Vladimir Zelenskyy of Ukraine has been keenly watched, and the fact that it's happened with so much frequency also is conveying a big message in itself, isn't it, Ambassador Mukherjee? This will silence all those naysayers, all those individuals who try to criticize India on any occasion, even after Prime Minister went to Russia to meet Vladimir Putin, even after he, after India, of course, decided to continue our purchase of oil, despite, of course, the rebuttals from the Oil and Petroleum Minister at that point, Hardeep Singh Puri, at World Fora. There were still the critics who would speak out against India. But this meeting says a lot, but will that end the criticism, or is that something too much to ask for?
Well, Uday, the meeting was sought for by the Ukrainian side. That is very significant. It demonstrates that despite some, I won't call it negative, but avoidable body language of President Zelenskyy during the Kiev meeting, it demonstrates that Zelenskyy and Ukraine have come around to the perspective that India is a trusted interlocutor between Ukraine and the Russian Federation. If you don't have an interlocutor who is acceptable to both sides, then how can you bring a conflict to an end? When I use the word interlocutor, I use it very carefully. I am not using the word mediator. I'm using the word interlocutor. You first need an interlocutor to find out what is called in math the basic common denominator of agreement. If that can be worked out, then a mediation can commence depending on how it is to be done. Should it be in Geneva? Should it be in a neutral country? Should it be done with maybe 4 or 5 countries in the room, etc.? Each country acceptable to both sides. But the point here is that the fact that this meeting took place at Ukraine's request demonstrates that Ukraine has understood and accepted that because Prime Minister briefed President Putin after his meeting with Zelenskyy, and President Putin said that he welcomed the efforts made by India in this regard, it demonstrates that he has understood that much more than his Western and NATO allies, here is a country that would be in a position to be able to at least move the process forward, because the conflict, if it continues, has already destroyed half of Ukraine, and there are no immediate prospects of who is going to spend so much money to rebuild the other half. So if Zelenskyy, as a patriotic Ukrainian, wants to save his country, then he should welcome these efforts and move forward to stop the conflict, instead of listening to those who want every able Ukrainian standing and alive to oppose the Russian Federation until Ukraine is completely finished and wiped off the map. He should understand the reality. It would appear to me, Uday, that maybe finally he is understanding the light at the end of the tunnel, which is represented by our Prime Minister, Narendra Modi.
All right, let me leave the last word then on this to Robinder Sachdev.
Thank you so much. I mean, there's no last word. As our eminent colleagues have pointed out, it's a complex scenario. The one point I'll say, stoppage of this conflict is deeply, deeply in our national self-interest also. Sure, it's for the good of humanity, it's good for multiple things across the world, but the more Russia continues down this path, the more Russia is getting downgraded military-wise, economy-wise, the more it will be, and it is tilting towards China, and the more that is not in our interest. So therefore, a pause or a stoppage of this war, immediate at the earliest, I think is the bestest for us in our germ of our self-interest.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.